She stood on crutches at the edge of a candlelit restaurant, shaking from cold and pain, and asked a question no one wanted to answer. "Can I sit here?" One by one, they turned her away. Not loudly, not cruelly, just enough to remind her she didn't belong anymore. Then she stopped at the last table. The only empty chair in the room. The one no one dared touch. Because the man sitting there didn't share space, didn't tolerate weakness, and didn't forgive mistakes. He was a Mafia boss. And when he looked up at her prosthetic leg, the room went silent. What he did next didn't just shock everyone watching. It changed both their lives forever. Celine Parker's crutches clicked against the icy sidewalk like a countdown she couldn't stop. 6 blocks ago her car had died with a cough and a flash of smoke, and the city had answered with December wind sharp enough to bite. Every step sent a jolt up her arms and straight into the place her leg used to be. The phantom pain was a cruel trick. Nothing there, yet everything screaming. By the time she reached the restaurant doors, her hands were shaking so badly she could barely grip the handles. The red dress clung to her like a dare. 18 months ago it had been meant for a wedding. Now it was a memorial she wore on purpose, the only way she knew to say, "I'm still here." She pushed inside. Heat rushed at her, too warm, too bright. Crystal chandeliers spilled light across white tablecloths and candle flames. Christmas arrangements gleamed in glass vases like the whole room had agreed to pretend life was soft. Celine didn't belong in soft places anymore. Heads turned anyway. Their eyes dipped to the prosthetic under the hem of her dress, then snapped away as if shame could erase what they'd seen. Whispers hid behind wine glasses. The stare that followed her was always the same, curiosity wrapped in discomfort. She swallowed it down and moved forward. An empty chair sat at a table near the center, a couple finishing dessert. Celine approached carefully, breathing through the burn in her shoulders. "Excuse me," she said. "Can I?" The woman's smile tightened. "Oh, I'm sorry. We're saving it." Celine saw the lie settle in her eyes like dust. Still, she nodded and backed away like she hadn't just been dismissed from being human. She moved to the next table, men in suits, laughter too loud. "That seat's taken," one of them said without looking up. The next table. And the next. Each rejection wore a different mask, polite, dismissive, annoyed, but it carried the same message. Not here, not with us, not like that. Her grip slipped. For a second her balance wavered and the room tilted, bright light turning sickly. A flash slammed into her without warning. Ethan Carter's laugh in a car that smelled like cologne and promises. His fingers laced with hers while he tried her future name, grinning like it was already real. The intersection. The truck. Metal folding. His hand going limp in hers. Then the hospital. White ceilings. A doctor's mouth moving. Dead. Amputation. Celine blinked until the restaurant returned. She stood in the middle of the dining room with her chest tight, trying not to crumble under 100 invisible stares. Why did I live? The question rose up the way it always did, sharp, unfair, familiar. She looked toward the door. She could leave. She could crawl back into the cold and limp home and pretend she hadn't tried to sit among the living. Then she saw the corner table. One man. Alone. Dark suit. Still posture. The chair across from him was empty, but not because it wasn't available, because no one dared take it. The space around him had been cleared by something stronger than manners. His face was handsome in a harsh, controlled way. Sharp jaw. Black hair combed with precision. A glass of whiskey sat untouched near his hand. But it was his eyes that stopped her. Dark. Watchful. The kind of eyes that didn't look away first. Celine's instincts whispered warning. People gave him space for a reason. Men like that didn't tolerate interruptions. But her arms were failing. Her residual limb was raw inside the socket. The cold had stiffened her fingers until she could barely feel them. She needed one chair. Just one. Celine moved toward him with the last of her strength, crutches planting on either side of her like anchors. Conversations lowered as she passed. Silverware slowed. The room leaned in. She stopped at his table. Up close, he was worse, controlled power under skin, the kind of stillness that promised violence if you pushed the wrong way. He lifted his gaze, slow and measured, and took her in, the prosthetic, the tremor in her hands, the red dress that didn't match the exhaustion on her face. Celine forced herself not to flinch. "Can I sit here?" she asked. And for a heartbeat, the restaurant held its breath. The man, Roman Hart, though Celine didn't know his name yet, didn't answer right away. Something shifted behind his eyes, quick as a blade turning in light. Then he stood. Roman Hart rose from his chair with deliberate calm, the movement smooth enough to feel practiced. The scrape of wood against marble echoed louder than it should have. Nearby conversations died mid-sentence. A fork slipped from someone's hand and clattered to the floor. Roman stepped around the table and pulled out the empty chair across from him. "Please," he said. His voice was low, controlled, and unexpectedly gentle. "Sit." The word hit Celine harder than the cold had. "Not sure." "Not if you must." Not the brittle politeness she'd learned to brace for. "Sit." As if she belonged there. As if her presence wasn't an inconvenience. She stared at him, breath trapped somewhere between disbelief and panic. Are you sure?" Roman met her eyes without blinking. "I don't say things I don't mean." Her throat tightened. Celine lowered herself into the chair carefully, moving the way she'd trained herself to, slow, controlled, never asking for help. Roman didn't rush her. Didn't hover. He simply waited, standing there like the moment mattered. When she was settled, he returned to his seat. The restaurant exhaled. Sound crept back in, muted conversation, the hum of music, the clink of glasses. But every few seconds, someone glanced their way, trying to understand the impossible equation forming at that table. Celine folded her hands in her lap to keep them from shaking. "Thank you," she whispered. "No," Roman said quietly. "You don't need to thank me." She looked up at that. His gaze held hers, steady and intent, like he was seeing something everyone else had missed. Not the crutches. Not the absence beneath the dress. "I'm Roman," he added. "Celine." Her name sounded smaller out loud than it felt inside her chest. A waiter appeared almost instantly, eyes flicking to Roman with practiced caution. "The lady will have the butternut squash soup," Roman said without consulting a menu. "And the roasted chicken." Celine blinked. "I didn't." "And hot tea," he continued. "Extra honey." The waiter nodded and vanished. "How did you know?" Celine asked once they were alone again. Roman's eyes dropped briefly to her hands, still faintly red from the cold. "You're shaking. You walked in from outside." The answer was simple, practical. It undid her anyway. No one had paid attention like that since Ethan. The name flickered through her mind uninvited, bringing with it a familiar ache. She pushed it down and focused on Roman instead. "You didn't have to do that," she said. "I wanted to." Something in his tone made the words feel heavier than they should have. The soup arrived, steam curling upward like warmth made visible. Celine wrapped her fingers around the bowl and inhaled. When she took the first spoonful, her eyes burned. She hadn't realized how hungry she was. Roman watched her eat without pretending not to, his own food untouched. "You've had a long day," he said. "Yes." Not a question. Not an assumption. She nodded, surprised by the honesty of it. "My car broke down. I walked. In this weather." She shrugged. "I didn't have much choice." Roman's jaw tightened, just slightly. Silence settled between them, Not awkward, not empty. It felt held. "What do you do, Celine?" he asked. "I was a trauma nurse," she said, the past tense catching in her throat. Before. Before the intersection. Before the hospital bed. Before everything fractured. Roman didn't press. Didn't ask the questions everyone else always did. He waited. 18 months of restraint cracked all at once. "My fiancé died," she said quietly. "The same night I lost my leg." Roman didn't move. Didn't interrupt. "I woke up with nothing," Celine continued, staring into the soup as if the memory might float there. "They told me he was gone. Then they told me I was different. And then they told me I couldn't go back to the life I loved." Her voice wavered, then steadied. "I've been trying to figure out who I am ever since." Roman leaned forward, forearms resting on the table. "I know what it's like," he said slowly, "to wake up and realize the person you were is gone." She looked at him, startled. For the first time, something flickered across his face, an echo of darkness, carefully leashed. "My father taught me that caring is dangerous," Roman said. "That love is a weakness people use against you." Celine swallowed. "And do you believe him?" Roman hesitated. Across the restaurant, a man whispered Roman's name under his breath. Someone else shifted uneasily. Roman heart, untouchable, feared, sat in candlelight with a woman everyone else had turned away. "I did," Roman said. His eyes stayed on Celine's. "Until tonight." The weight of that settled between them, charged and unspoken. Celine's heart beat faster, not from fear, but from something far more dangerous. Hope. Roman didn't let Celine walk back into the cold. That decision settled into him the moment she reached for her crutches, bracing herself like she expected the world to push back. "I'll drive you," he said. Celine's spine straightened. "That's not necessary." "I know." His voice wasn't challenging. It was calm. "Certain." "I can manage," she added, sharper than she meant. Pride flared fast when you'd spent months being pitted. Roman studied her for a moment, then nodded. "I don't doubt that." The words surprised her. "I'm not offering because you can't," he continued. "I'm offering because you shouldn't have to." That stopped her. Outside, the cold had sharpened, wind slicing between buildings. Roman shrugged out of his coat and placed it over her shoulders without asking. It smelled like clean fabric and something darker underneath. "You'll freeze," she said weakly. "I won't." His car waited at the curb, black, expensive, quiet. He opened the door and waited while she maneuvered inside, never touching unless she asked, never rushing. The ride was silent in a way that felt intentional. Streetlights slid past. Christmas decorations blurred into soft color. Celine leaned her head back, exhaustion pulling her down. "Thank you," she said again, softer this time. "For tonight." Roman's eyes stayed on the road. "You didn't ask for much." Her building came into view, old brick, flickering light by the entrance. Roman parked and stepped out, retrieving her crutches. They stood on the sidewalk, breath clouding between them. "You make people uncomfortable," Celine said suddenly. Roman arched a brow. "So do you." She smiled despite herself. He watched her climb the steps slowly, never offering help she hadn't requested. When she reached the door, she turned back. "Good night, Roman." He inclined his head. "Good night, Celine." Roman stayed until the light in her apartment flicked on. He told himself that would be the end of it. It wasn't. 2 weeks passed. Roman buried himself in work, meetings, negotiations, the machinery of power grinding on. But every quiet moment pulled him back to a woman in a red dress who'd asked for a chair like it was a right. He found himself driving through her neighborhood on a Tuesday afternoon. Coincidence, he told himself. The pharmacy window proved him a liar. Celine stood at the counter, counting bills with hands that trembled just slightly. Roman didn't need to hear the words to understand the math happening in her eyes. He crossed the street before doubt could catch him. Celine. She turned too fast, swaying before she caught herself. Roman. I was nearby. A lie. A small one. She looked at him like she wasn't sure if he was real. What are you doing here? Roman glanced at the pharmacist. Add her prescriptions to my bill. No, Celine said immediately. Absolutely not. Roman met her gaze. Let me. I don't need charity. I know. The word landed again, steady and unyielding. This isn't charity, he said quietly. It's choice. Her jaw tightened. Pride fought gratitude. Then she nodded once. Thank you. In the car afterward, she didn't pull away when he handed her the bag. They talked. About nothing important. About everything. Her therapy. His restlessness. The small humiliations of daily survival. The loneliness of being seen only for what you are, never who you might be. Roman listened like it mattered. That was the problem. Across the city, Enzo Luca watched patterns form. Roman leaving meetings early. Disappearing at odd hours. Softer edges creeping into a man raised to be sharp. Enzo followed him one evening. From a distance, he saw it all, the careful way Roman stood near Celine without touching. The way his face changed when she smiled. The way he leaned in like the rest of the world could disappear if she asked. Enzo lifted his phone. Click, click. Roman didn't see him. He was too busy learning how dangerous it felt to want something real. 3 days later, Roman received a message from his father. Come to dinner. The kind of invitation that wasn't optional. Roman stared at his phone, a familiar chill settling in his chest. Across town, Celine stood by her window, watching snow start to fall. Neither of them knew the photographs already changing hands. The dining room at Don Vittorio's estate was silent in the way only power could enforce. Long table. Heavy chairs. Faces carved from discipline and bloodlines. Roman stood at the far end while photographs were slid across polished wood like evidence in a trial. Celine. Laughing outside her building. Roman's hand hovering near her elbow. Their heads bent together in a way no one was supposed to see. Enzo Luca watched with thin satisfaction. Don Vittorio picked up the last photo and studied it longer than the rest. Who is she? Roman didn't look away. Someone I love. The word detonated. A cripple. Enzo sneered. You're risking everything for a broken woman. Lucia Brooks's breath hitched. Roman, think. She's a liability. Enough. Don Vittorio's voice cut clean through the room. My office. The door closed behind them with a final, echoing thud. Don Vittorio turned slowly, every movement measured. How long? 4 months. And you thought to hide her? Not a question. Roman held his ground. I knew you'd see weakness where I saw truth. Don Vittorio's eyes hardened. Truth gets men killed. Love makes you predictable. She makes me human. That's the problem. The Don stepped closer, voice dropping. Our enemies know now. They will use her. Hurt her. Kill her to break you. Then I'll protect her. You'll fail, his father said calmly. Everyone does. The room seemed to shrink around them. End it, Don Vittorio continued. Or walk away from this family. No name. No protection. No inheritance. Roman felt the weight settle. How long do I have? 48 hours. Roman left the estate and drove without direction until he was parked outside Celine's building, hands gripping the steering wheel until they ached. He climbed the stairs like a man approaching judgment. Celine opened the door smiling, and then she saw his face. "What's wrong? We need to talk." The words carried their own gravity. Inside her small apartment, Roman sat across from her, the truth pressing against his ribs. "I haven't been honest," he said. "About who I am." She nodded slowly. "I assumed. My family is not legitimate," he continued. "My father is Don Vittorio. I was raised to inherit everything you saw tonight." Celine's face drained of color. "They found out about you," Roman said. "They've given me a choice." Her voice was barely audible. "Me or them?" "Yes." Silence stretched thin. "I won't let you do that," Celine said suddenly, standing too fast. Her crutches clattered. "You'll hate me for it." "I won't." "You will," she insisted, tears forming. "When everything's gone." Roman crossed the space between them in 2 strides, hands gripping her shoulders gently. "Listen to me." She shook her head. "I'm not worth your life. You're the only part of it that's real." She collapsed against him, sobbing, and he held her like the world was already trying to tear her away. "I'm scared," she whispered. "So am I." They stayed that way until the truth became impossible to ignore. "I choose you," Roman said finally. 48 hours later, the estate was full. Everyone who mattered watched Roman stand before Don Vittorio one last time. "I choose her," Roman said. "I choose love." Lucia cried. Enzo smiled. Don Vittorio stared as if at a stranger. "You walk out that door," the Don said. "You're nothing." Roman turned anyway. The gates closed behind him. He drove straight to Celine. When she opened the door and saw the duffel bag, understanding hit like a wave. "What have you done?" "I came home." She fell into his arms, crying into his chest as if the ground itself had shifted. "I'm not worth this," she sobbed. Roman cupped her face, forcing her to look at him. "You're everything." They sank to the floor together, the world outside already rearranging itself. The countdown was over. 6 months later, Roman Hart woke before dawn to the sound of Celine moving carefully across the apartment floor. The place was small. 2 rooms. Thin walls. Heat that rattled when it kicked on. Nothing about it resembled the life he'd left behind. He'd never slept better. Roman pulled on work boots still dusted with concrete. Construction was honest in a way his old world had never been. When he came home sore and exhausted, Celine met him with a smile that made every ache worth it. Money was tight. Danger still circled at the edges. But they were alive. Celine sat at the table adjusting her prosthetic, jaw clenched in concentration. Roman crossed the room without speaking and knelt in front of her, hand steady as he fixed the strap that had twisted. "You don't have to do that," she murmured. "I know." She let him anyway. That was the difference. They learned each other slowly. How grief came in waves for her. How violence lived quietly inside him. How love wasn't loud declarations but consistency, restraint, staying when it would have been easier to run. Celine went back to school part-time. Case management. Advocacy. Work that let her use her mind when her body wouldn't cooperate. Some days she came home defeated. Roman listened without trying to fix it. Some nights he woke from dreams soaked in blood. Celine didn't ask questions. She just held him until the shaking stopped. They survived the hard days. A year after the night that changed everything, Roman brought Celine back to the restaurant. She recognized it the moment they stepped inside. Same chandeliers. Same candles. Same music. Different people. Her breath caught as they approached the corner table. "This is where you said yes," Celine whispered. Roman smiled. "This is where you asked." They sat together, hands intertwined across the table. Dinner passed easily. Laughter came quicker now. When dessert arrived, Celine noticed someone standing nearby. A young woman. Pregnant. Bruises half hidden beneath makeup. Her hands shook as she clutched the strap of a worn bag. "Excuse me," she said softly. "Can I sit here?" Celine looked up at Roman. He stood immediately and pulled out a chair. "Please," he said. "We'd be honored." The woman cried before she sat. They listened. They fed her. They gave her numbers, resources, warmth. Kindness passed forward like breath. Later, back in their apartment, Celine traced the scars on Roman's hands. Old ones, new ones, proof of a life reshaped. "Do you regret it?" she asked quietly. "Everything you gave up." Roman pressed a kiss to her knuckles. "I lost an empire." She waited. "I gained a life." Celine smiled, real and unguarded. Outside, snow began to fall. Somewhere across the city, Don Vittorio ruled an empire without an heir. Somewhere, Enzo plotted with nothing to gain. Somewhere, the world kept turning exactly as it always had. But in that small apartment, two broken people had built something unbreakable. Not perfect, not easy, but real. Celine rested her head against Roman's chest, listening to a heartbeat she knew would never abandon her. They had been told love was weakness. They had been wrong. Love had cost them everything hollow and given them everything that mattered. And it all began with one exhausted woman, standing in the cold, asking for a place to sit. Celine walked into that restaurant thinking she was invisible. Roman had spent his entire life making sure no one ever got close enough to matter. And in one quiet moment, everything changed. If Roman had looked away, this story wouldn't exist. If Celine had stopped asking, she would have walked back into the cold alone. So if this story moved you, if you believe one choice can change a life, help this story reach someone who needs it. Like the video. Share it with someone who might feel invisible right now. And subscribe, because stories like Celine and Roman's don't happen once. They happen every day. Quietly. In moments most people miss. And tell me in the comments, if you were Roman, would you have let her sit?